So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Kenton, and Kenton was my best friend, and because he has other best friends now, and but it's interesting. I would say his best friend is Nikki.
Andrew. Nikki.
Oh, Nikki, yeah. Okay. All right. This is going so well. All right. So Nikki's here, and I just got to tell you, I mean, I was there. You remember this, maybe? Well, you don't remember this, but what I remember is I was there when you asked Nikki to marry you in the gym.
Yes,
of First Church. You built a tree.
I did.
Was with pictures, and you brought her in there, and I was hidden in the sound booth.
Not just randomly.
No, I wasn't just I was there to take pictures. I was supposed to be there because you asked. I could watch your lips move, and then I could see her kind of nod, and then there was all this kissing. Just so much kissing. So
I didn't anticipate that.
I know you didn't, and I stopped. You know, after 5 minutes, I stopped taking pictures.
I know.
So it was great. And also, your mom, Betty, is here.
Can I say something about Nikki?
Well, it's your interview.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Nikki, I said too much probably in the video in chapel about Nikki. I won't go on and on about her now, but she is so important to me, and I want her to know that. So I wrote her a note about it. So this, but just for you, my dear.
That is. Kenton,
yes.
I met you in high school.
Yeah.
You came to NNU. You were heavily involved in student life and were student body president. You went off to a foreign land. You came back, and we worked together in campus life for 5 years. It was an amazing time. Can you just, that whole student involvement, student life experience that you took it to another level. Can you just tell us what kind of that meant to you?
Yeah, and I don't think there's any prospective students in here necessarily, but I mean, I would say this anyway. Like literally, the extracurricular side of NNU, the campus life side of NNU, made such a big impact on me. I use those leadership skills and strengths and servant leadership. I use that every day in the work that we're doing. And it really started in many ways on campus, doing it in SGA, doing it in clubs, doing it with just all these little student involvements that we did. One thing I mentioned to Tim, a few friends and I, there's no Greek system here at NNU, but Mike is back there. Mike was in this.
Yeah. So are you talking about the frat?
The fraternity.
Oh,
it wasn't a frat,
right.
But
okay.
A few friends and I started just a fake fraternity and just had fun with it. But literally for 2 years, we met every Monday night at 10 o'clock in the brick house. And we had these little rituals. We just had these little things we did. But we created this little culture in these 2 years. And it was so much fun. And I just loved it. And then the last few years, as our team at Because International and the work that we're doing with The Shoe That Grows, it was just me and a best friend doing it from our houses. And then these last few years, we're now at about 15 people on our staff. And we have been able to grow this culture and create culture. And I keep relating it back to what we did with the fraternity. And it's just, but again, just pointing back to these things that I learned while I was here. And Tim was such a big part of that. He was a huge mentor in my life. And just so many things I learned while a student at NMU that I still am using today. And I just find that so cool.
Absolutely. Can you take us back to the conversation you and I had when I was talking to you about the shoe that shrinks?
Yeah, that's we're still working on that.
All right. I just feel like I know it's a niche, but so I just think there may be a need out there.
We want to help.
Yeah, just because. Yeah, exactly. So it's my organization. So this will be great. So thinking of what you're doing now. I mean, the impact that Because is having, on a global scale. You know, kind of talk about during your time, both as a student, but also coming back and working at the university, how did that play a role in the birth of Because?
Yeah, and again, not just to say this to say it, but in many ways, what I learned as a student, the leadership skills, the just encouragement I got from everybody, I felt like I could do anything. And I thought I was going to be a missionary, and then I got homesick. But I really had this feeling of like whatever I want to do, like I can do it. Like God is there. I'm supported. I was so encouraged, and so that part was great. But then when I was an employee here and working with Tim, obviously we're doing so many campus life things with the students, but Tim was such a great boss, Carrie Cook, and just the Office of Campus Life. They knew I was working on this thing on the side, and they loved it. Like, they supported me. They encouraged me to take the time to do it. So it took us 6 years when I first had the idea for a shoe that could grow to when we had our first batch. It took us 6 years. A side note, when we got our first batch of shoes, 3,000 pairs, it was probably, 60 boxes that arrived at our house that each weigh 50 pounds. We had just had our first son. He was probably 4 or 5 months old, and I was out of town when the shipment arrived. So Nikki and a very nice truck driver who dropped the boxes off and saw that this new mom is set to unload all these boxes by herself. Nikki unloaded the first shipment of the shoe that grows. So thanks, Nikki. But it took 6 years, and during that time I was working here at NNU, and you gave me the time to explore this passion in my life, the time to pursue that calling, and then it was bittersweet when I decided to step away from NNU and kind of pursue it more. But it was really, we wouldn't be here, I don't think, if you wouldn't have given me that time to work on it.
Well, I'm honored.
It's an honor.
And I'm sure there's gifts and things involved with what you're saying, and so
I hope so. Yeah.
There's some shoes, I don't know, but it's gonna
lunch.
Really look for. Oh, that was a great lunch. Thank you, Andy and team. So it was good. And I know we don't have a lot of time, but I would just want to maybe close out our time here. What, as you think back to your moments here at NNU, and all the laughs and fun and things that really we can't talk about in front of a crowd, but those things that would be appropriate. What sticks out to you in your mind?
Wow. I'll say something. I hope it's not cheesy because I don't want it to be, but servant leadership. And by that I mean, I used to think, I learned it growing up from my dad, who was a plumber and just worked so hard. From mom, who was just so nice to everybody. But probably a little part of me always thought, I don't want to be the guy who's putting away the chairs at the end of the event, or how can I get out of taking out the trash, things like that. And then coming to NNU, being a part of a campus life and student leadership where those things were expected, encouraged. That's how you showed you were a leader, because you stayed and put away the chairs. You were last in line for food. You were the one who took out the trash. You wrote the thank you notes. Like, just those things, for that to be ingrained in me of like, that's what a leader does. And those are things I still try to do, even especially as our team grows, and because they're national, I want them to see that I still take out the trash. I still, do these little things. And as I look for more people, last year was our 10-year reunion for me as a student here, and I helped coordinate the lunch, and we connected with some Brick House students to help us out. One of those Brick House students was such a servant. He wouldn't let me do the dishes. He took care of them. He was so kind. In like a 10-minute interaction, I was so impressed with him that I got his name, I got his phone number. When he graduated, we called him, we hired him. He works for us now, and he's incredible. And those are the things that I look back at my time at NNU, and I just know, servant leaders, you do it a certain way because that's how you do it. And that was really ingrained on me from you. Thank you, Tim, honestly, and from so many others. So
I will just say this as our time comes to a close. I'm incredibly proud of you. I'm serious. It's the life that you live and the example you set in owning a community, as far as you love this place and you can see it, you sense it from everything you do, and your heart of compassion is such a bright light and an example. And as your influence continues to move out into literally the world, I am so grateful that I have a front row seat for that and am a part of that story. And so this honor that this community is bestowing upon you is so well deserved. And I know you humbly accept it, but you continue to model the exact things that you said. And so congratulations to you, Kenton.
I appreciate that.
That's wonderful. Next, we have Lisa Nordstrom, and she's going to be interviewed by her husband, John.
I wasn't supposed to do this. Unfortunately, the original person who was supposed to interview Lisa was her former professor, Steve Shaw, who, as some of you know, has been having some issues with a concussion. So he's at a doctor's appointment right now instead. So this is a little awkward because I just found out about this yesterday. So we're gonna do the best we can. We don't know each other quite as well as Tim and Kenton do, obviously. And we're probably not as close as those two are. So we'll do what we can. Okay, so you did mention some of the classes that you really enjoyed when you were in your video, but I felt like you highlighted Kevin Dennis's class, and Kevin Dennis was there, and they got to talk afterwards. That was nice. But I thought that Steve Shaw was going to probably grill you on some of his classes and the impact they had on you.
I know I was excited because I was hoping maybe I would know some of the answers to his questions this time around. It was a little dicier 25 years ago. Well, and I hear he's still using the blue books, so you know, and some things apparently haven't changed.
So, what did you really like about Steve Shaw's classes?
Well, I'm a poli-sci nerd. I love elections. I love government, civil discourse. You know, my career is in law. I really think, you know, being able to talk about big ideas and to disagree in a way that is appropriate and allows conversation to occur. We don't all have to agree. We can still be friends. And you know, I go into the courtroom with my colleagues at the bar, and we duke it out. You know, and we argue aggressively for our positions, and then we go outside in the hall, and we're friends, and you know, we chat. We go out to lunch, and we don't always agree, but I just think that, you know, some of those skills and ideas I learned early on from him.
So you mentioned in the video that you're third generation Northwest Nazarene. How did you decide to come here instead of go somewhere else?
So I went to high school in Southern California, and so I was in the Point Loma School District. And I don't know, I just never felt like I was destined to, you know, remain in Southern California. So I visited Seattle Pacific and NNC, and my parents had gone to NNC, and I was kind of intrigued that there were cows in a metropolitan statistical area, and I just, you know, it was just amazing. So what I really liked about NNU and NNC at the time was like students were hanging out together and having fun, and a lot of them didn't have cars, and so like you were kind of trapped together. And, I kind of liked that, and so that's ultimately how I got here.
So you were out of district, and I know that you give to a Nordstrom Van Spangel business scholarship and have for several years. That was founded with your parents and me. And so, so can you talk about when that scholarship was formed, what were some of the ideas behind it? Because you kind of mentioned one of them just there.
Yeah, so I don't know. I know that there's good reasons why, districts really recruit students from inside the school district, or the church district, I guess. I wasn't one of those students, and so we kind of designed a scholarship for students that are out of district and or have come from community colleges that don't necessarily fit the mold of your typical, well, and you too. Not only did my dad go to a community college before transferring here in the late 60s, which you have spent a decade teaching at the College of Western Idaho. And so we have a real, I guess, passion for people that want to pursue a 4-year degree to be able to do that. And, having a scholarship here allows us to support that.
And I was a Nazarene, and so that was one of the other ideas. I don't think it's gone to a non-Nazarene student yet, but I grew up Lutheran, and so the idea of it didn't have to necessarily be
anyway.
A Nazarene to get the scholarship. So let's see here. So I guess because I'm up here, and it's kind of, this is a question I don't think Shaw would have asked, is
I'm sure.
how did you meet your husband?
Well, you're more of the one who remembers this more clearly than I do. But you kind of get thrown out there as freshmen into this, pool of students. And I came from Southern California. My understanding was I stuck out. I didn't quite fit in, largely because I was wearing shorts all the time when it was not seasonally appropriate, and so that was part of it. But John was smart. He scoped out, where to meet me. He usually with snacks. Snacks were very important to woo me, and so he was.
So here's how we actually first met. She's not actually telling the story. So we were in college choir. College choir was moved. It was not in its normal location. And so Lisa was slowly walking to the location with an ice cream cone.
Snacks.
Yes. And I ran up to her, and I didn't run up to her and say, hey. I kind of walked fast and made sure I caught up, came alongside of her, and when she got close to the location, I diverted her, said, no, we're actually over here today, and we talked. And so that was really our first long conversation. I think it was in September still, or maybe it was October, I don't know, but it was pretty early in the school year. We ended up studying together for several different classes, and so.
But he was dating someone else.
But not here, not locally. It's a long time ago now, so maybe just wait. Okay, so I really feel like the video was just the tip of the iceberg as to all of the things that Lisa does and all the things that Lisa is. And so I felt like she needed an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the organization that she works closely with and has as a board member and as a volunteer for a decade now, Family Advocates, and not only give a little bit better idea of what they do, but maybe let people know if they are interested in helping out with your mission of helping kids in the area, what they could do to help out too.
I was very fortunate. You look at all the risk factors that kids have when they're growing up, and I really didn't have any of them. My parents are married. We didn't really have mental health or homelessness or incarceration type issues, drug addiction issues in our family at all. And so, I lived kind of this very sheltered, idyllic life. And it's funny when I look back over time, you see a pattern of interacting with people and situations where really child abuse and neglect, even though I didn't experience that personally, were all around me. And the first time I was in a courtroom was when I was 10 years old. And the next door neighbors to us had an unlicensed daycare in the Bay Area. And ultimately, I was one of the older kids there, and my sister and I both went. And we were actually called as witnesses because the daycare provider was charged with a count or two of murder, a couple counts of mayhem, 30 counts of child abuse for what happened there. And so, that was my first, I guess, exposure to a courtroom. And in some of the work I've done since then, some of the students that I tutored and translated for at West Junior High here in Nampa, are now incarcerated serving life sentences. And they were the victims of abuse. And they perpetuated that as well. And my first job as a lawyer was as a Kenton County prosecutor out in Caldwell. And I did child protection work there and developed an expertise. And so now that I'm a corporate lawyer doing my, shtick with the accountants and the engineers and the economists, this is kind of a great way to still use that, information and passion and skills that I have to go out and really try to protect some kids that really need someone to argue for them. And so the organization I work with is called Family Advocates. I'm on their board, and I volunteer for them as well. And they represented 710 kids last year that were in foster care who had been abandoned, neglected, or abused. And so, I represented, about 7 or 8 of them. And so I work with volunteer guardians ad litem. They're everyday people from all different professions, and they perform an investigation on behalf of the judge and write a report or several reports for them. And I help facilitate their interaction in the courtroom, and if they need to testify, I put them on the witness stand and then do some redirect questions and things like that. And so it's great. I feel like there's a lot of different ways to give back. And my favorite people, by and large, there's a lot of preachers, teachers, and cops in my life, and I love them all. And those are very service-oriented professions. I don't think anyone thinks a corporate attorney is a servant, a servant leader. But I do think that we can all use our skills in ways that serve our community. And I think I agree that what you learn here and kind of the attitude of being a part of a larger whole and how we can serve our fellow man and reflect Christ in our community is really important, and we can do it in ways that are a little non-traditional.
Is our time up, or do I have time for one more question?
Go ahead, one more.
One more? Okay. So, so that was a little heavier, so I can lighten it up a little bit, I guess. So, since we've been gone, how long is it now? I guess Lisa graduated in 1993. She started in 1990 with me and everyone else who graduated in 1994. Lisa's a little bit of an overachiever.
Surprise.
And so I guess the last thing would be is just, is there anyone that you didn't thank in the video that you'd like to thank now? Maybe some people who are here.
That's a good hint, Jeff. Yeah. Well, I'm very fortunate to have a lot of people in my life that support me, and I've got my family who are blood that are here with me, my family by marriage, some of whom traveled quite a ways, as well as some adult and childhood friends who are also here today, and I really appreciate you guys who have, I'm not always I know this is shocking too, a carefree, lighthearted person. I like to argue and fight the good fight, and I like to pick my fights, and you guys all understand kind of that, and appreciate my prickly personality, but I'm always there in a pinch, and that's just kind of how I roll.
Thanks.
Isn't it nice to get better acquainted with everybody? So next, we have the privilege of Dr. Brent Peterson is going to interview the Reverend Dr. Scott Daniels.
So Scott and I, in our top 5 gifts, are competitive. And so we're going to win one category of intimacy. I've known Scott since March of 1980. And that worked out mostly okay, but this is really about a therapy session, not an interview. So Scott's a little bit older than I am. We met at Aurora Church of the Nazarene, and I grew up in that church and said, you know, Brent, you're a good kid, but can you just be a little more like Scott Daniels? So with my life, I've been in the shadow. Scott's always been taller and fatter than I've been, and I was trying to reach up to that echelon. But I've been noticing something, Scott, on this list here. I noticed one of our alumnus started a company that is making a global impact around the world with shoes and doing, you know, phenomenal work, caring for the needs in creative ways. Another person is a corporate lawyer who's in charge of a multi-state public utility, and in the spare time is the advocate for children and youth. And what have you done, actually?
As my son said when I got my doctorate, I am a doctor who can help no one.
That sounds about right, actually. So Scott came to NNU, and he majored in theater. Unfortunately, actually, theater wasn't really a major. So tell us about your early days at NNU. What are some impressions that you have of your time here at NNU?
Yeah. Well, I had to tell one, my favorite story of the day so far has been, so this morning as we were getting ready, 3 of our kids are out of the house. She's a junior in high school, and Deb and Sophie and I were getting ready, and Sophie said, so Dad, are you the only one getting honored today? And I said, no, there's a couple others. I said, there's a professional achievement. And I said, you know Kenton. Kenton's getting the Young Alumnus of the Year. And so we got this look on her face. She goes, you're not the Young Alumnus? I said, no. She goes, Dad, you're the Old Alumnus. She was sad that her dad's life is basically done now. So I came to NNU in 1984. My mom and dad, we moved to Seattle in 1979. I started 8th grade in Seattle. And so I knew NNC because we would come over for regional activities days all the time. And Aurora, you know, the Washington Pacific District was really fun. Lots of quiz teams and basketball teams and very competitive. And we'd come over and play in stuff here. But this was kind of the last place I thought I would come. I had a traumatic preppy experience when I was a sophomore in high school. So this was 1982, and I was very much a Seattle preppy kid. Those were the days when you would wear polo shirts, but you'd wear 2 at a time. So you'd wear one on the inside that matched the horse on the outside. And so I had both collars up, and I had a pair of
confession is good for the soul.
It is. I had a pair of bright orange Converse All-Stars on, and I walked in just looking good. And
it's the last time, I think.
Yeah, right. Into the cafeteria into Saga in those days, and I walked in, and this huge baseball player. I was carrying my tray back over to my chair, and this huge baseball player stopped me and just got in my way, and he reached across and he put my collars down, and he said to me, "We don't wear those like that here." And I remember thinking to myself, I am never, ever, ever, ever coming to this hick school in this cow town. There was no way that was going to happen. So
the Lord works in mysterious ways.
Lord works in mysterious ways. But actually, it's been interesting as we were preparing for NYC this summer. I went to World Youth Congress, and at the time, I really was into sports. I was a terrible athlete, but I loved sports, and so I wanted to be a sports journalist. I thought I would go to Seattle Pacific or somewhere like that. And I had worked for Seattle Pacific sports teams all through high school, and so. But I went to World Youth Congress, and I tell people it's really funny. I had just a real encounter with Christ at one of the services, and I left knowing 2 things. I left that the sense that I should go into ministry and follow the family business. And but the other thing I felt the Lord say to me is I needed to come to NNC. And so I joke with students that that's bad when coming to NNC was my version of taking up my cross and following Jesus.
You're not the only one.
Yeah, but it was. But I will say this, that when I got here, all of that changed. And so I rather than coming begrudgingly, it took me all of about 5 minutes for me to learn to love this place. And high school had been fine. I'd gone to a Christian school, but I'd always felt not completely marginalized, but not certainly at the center of the life of high school. High school was, I think back, more of an endurance than it was just always ever feeling quite at home. And then I got here and it was like, these are my people. Like I totally get, I get the culture, I get what the school's trying to do to me. I get what it means to have friends here. I even get going to college in a small town where you have to create your own fun. And all of that, all of a sudden was just like, this is my place. And so I felt right at home the minute I got here.
You said a couple times it's been an interesting honor and a fun honor to be able to be a pastor of folks for whom we're professors. Who are some of the people, with friends or professors, that really marked your time here, that shaped kind of your time here?
Yeah, so I'll get in trouble if I start the list, because I pastor quite a few of them now. But
they're all special.
They're all special.
And they all should feel honored.
Yes,
that we're honoring them right now. Honoring
they were all equally influential in my life then. You know, one of the things I think that I learned to love about Nampa and about NNC in particular, I taught at SNU for 6 years, and I think of Bethany and Nampa as similar places. They're both places Nazarenes go to die. I tell people Nampa is just Bethany, just trade out all the Southern Baptists for LDS, and you get kind of Nampa. You add mountains and beauty, and then to take away tornadoes. But
part of our new slogan.
But both places were places that if you became a faculty member, you didn't move there on purpose. Like you moved there to give yourself to something. And it took me a while as a city kid to learn to appreciate like the agricultural rhythms of seasons and the kind of life of people who would come and teach and stay for 40 years or an entire career. And so last summer was, you know, for us at College Church was a really, it was a summer of loss, but also a summer of really celebrating some significant people. And so it began with Ed Robinson dying, and then Gary Gansky passed away, and then Roxy Miller passed away, and then Paul and Jane Taylor were killed. And so it was just kind of a summer of deep loss, but also of celebrating people who in very similar ways had loved this place, and generations of students who'd come through this place, and generations of people who had worked at this place, and who had all lived, I want to say humble lives, but very, very beautiful lives, not trying to blow their own trumpet, draw attention to themselves, but living in ways that just, as we celebrated them, you could just sense, man, these people had shaped all of these people for so long. And so I think even in my own journey, I mean, you laugh about I haven't done anything, but I do think there was a time about 3 years ago, I mean, coming back, where I was working 2 jobs. I was an administrator at a Christian university, and I was pastoring Pasadena First. And I could see that probably the next step for me was academic administration, was in getting offers to consider those kinds of things. And really, the change in coming was, first of all, a realization of myself how deeply I love pastoral ministry and preaching and shaping the theology of a congregation week after week. And so to get a chance to do that, but then to do that in an environment, what I loved most about university work, and I so appreciate Joel and people who give themselves to administrate places like this, because I think Joel's job, I think leading Christian universities and seminaries right now, Jaren's here this week, I think it's the hardest job in the church. But the chance to get to teach and to do those things I loved, and I began to realize that's really where my passions are, where my heart is, and so part of my desire was to continue to elevate the role of the preaching ministry in the life of the church, and to get a chance to put my fingerprints on a couple more generations of people come through.
Yeah, one thing I want to kind of take that and go a little deeper. One of the places, kind of what your life has been, is, and similar to mine, is living in the world of the church and the academy. In our Nazarene denomination and the church universal, those places have often not always gotten along well. How have you navigated, and how do you see that relationship? I mean, that's for your life, but why is the church and the academies, why is it so important for that relationship to work well? Where are its challenges and where can its future go?
Yeah, so I didn't expect to do that part of it, right? I didn't expect to do the academic part. And I tell people, if you would have come to my 22-year-old self standing in line at NNC's graduation and say, you'll end up being a faculty member someday back at the university, I laughed at you and said, yeah, right. I'm going to go preach, and that's what I'm going to do. And I think I embodied as a student some of the sort of this academic stuff's nice, but real ministry is about other stuff than this academic stuff. And then I got to seminary and got talked into staying, and all of a sudden I just fell in love. It was like, this is a conversation. This is a robust conversation about God, about the Scripture, about how to live faithfully in a changing culture. How do we embody this? And now all of a sudden I'm addicted to this conversation, and it's like, in some ways I stayed in academics because I just didn't want to get out of that conversation. It was just I wanted to keep that going. But it was heartbreaking to me, my first teaching position. I didn't realize I now took a position that would hold me in suspicion with people who used to trust me. So it was just weird. It was just the weirdest. Heather was one of my students back then. It was just weird to be like, I didn't change. I just the conversation had changed. My sense of what we were supposed to be doing had altered a little bit. And it wasn't horrible. It wasn't like everybody, but it was just enough of the sense that, wow, teaching theology and biblical studies is really an insecure position in the church. And so I struggled a bit with the sense that the church was, the local church was so much obsessed with like church growth movement and all those kinds of things, and so much of that is so good, but it didn't care about this other work going on. But at the same time, I was in this academic world that often some of us were sort of, and I wasn't this, but some of my colleagues were, I would say, damaged by the church or frustrated with the church. And so the antagonism went both ways and was kind of saying, like, we're doing the real work here and you're not doing that. And I just, so by God's grace, I just ended up always stuck between the two. And part of it was when I got this my contract was so bad, I needed to work. And I had no other marketable skills. So I would get a church job. And so I never had the option of divorcing what I was doing Monday through Friday in class from what we were doing Sunday in worship. And so with students, it was so fun to try to help them understand you don't have to do one or the other. You don't have to go this direction or that. You don't have to, and so how do we hold those two in tension? And I think that's part of what I feel like my calling has been, and part of what I felt like this opportunity afforded me was the chance to continue to do that, so I could pastor a lot of people who appreciate the fact that I can hang in there with them in some of their scholarly conversations, but at the same time, we can embody something that can change, that can transform the community, that transforms the lives of people who can't find Genesis, and then help students say you don't have to choose between theological integrity and successful ministry. That those things can happen together.
Scott has asked that I not ask about the two people in the room that he dated and the three that he had a crush on.
That's not true.
You want to ask him about those?
Yeah. My wife left.
Yeah. You're not recording, Darrell? Is that right? No record, low live stream?
I
So
think we're
tell us
about
about that time and they know. Last question here. And just, Scott is a key leader in our denomination. He's one of the most revered leaders, phenomenal preacher and leader for us, and it's a well-deserved honor that you have, with the joking aside. Scott's one of my friends and heroes, and it's a thrill to have him in Nampa. As you think about the future, in fact, this is a teaser for our 2 o'clock eschatology theology panel for any nerds in the room. And you mentioned earlier some of the challenges. And by the way, we're really thrilled to have on campus Jared Rowell, a 1983 NNU graduate. He's not in this room. My faculty's taking him out. He's the president of Nazarene Theological Seminary, but an 83 grad of NNU, Lebanon, Oregon kid. You mentioned the ways in which the future of higher education, and the folks in this room, I bet they're committed to NNU. And we're going to stay here and be here. We're not going anywhere, our new theme. What do you see as some of those challenges, and how do you think folks in the church can help us navigate those challenges to be some of our best days? Easy question.
Yeah. So 30 seconds. No, this is really challenging, and part of this commitment, part of even this move has been, there is something that I deeply love about, I said it in the video, 18 to 22-year-olds or 23-year-olds getting a chance to be part of a communal place of learning. The challenges on that are great, and the university, its reach far expands that. And so the adult education, I sat on a dissertation committee yesterday for somebody who's finishing their PhD in education here, and it's beautiful that that's part of the ministry of NNU as well. But there is still something so profound about an undergraduate community that lives together, worships together, eats together, dates together, studies together, dreams together, plays together, creates, sings, does, all those things. There's something just transformative about that, and something that I think the church's investment has, as the cost of that keeps going up, the church's investment and commitment to that has to continue to go up. As people's commitment to denominationalism decreases, that creates challenge for us as the percentage of students who identify as Nazarene continues to kind of creep down. But the opportunity then we still have to form students by that sort of warm-hearted Wesleyan Nazareneness that is the part of our DNA from the get-go, and will always, I hope, be part of our DNA. But how we then wrestle with that diversity and invite students into a story that may be new to them, or they may have parts of that story, but different parts, and adds to our story because of those things that they bring to us. There's something really beautiful and profound about that, and I hope that at NNU, that we don't lose that. I was at another Christian university in the spring. I was telling students about this recently. I was invited to speak in chapel at a school that does not have required chapel anymore. And I said it was really nice. They flew me there, put me up in a nice hotel, paid me well to speak to about 80 students. I think 8 guys and 72 women who showed up voluntarily for chapel, and it was great because they wanted to be there, but at the same time, there was this sense of a kind of loss of unique Christian identity because this wasn't a community that was worshiping together on a regular basis. And talking to faculty members about the struggle of how to keep that identity alive. I think if we lose our identity as this deeply committed place of not just the mind, but the heart and the whole body in service of Christ Jesus, if we lose that identity and just become a really nice private school on the outskirts of a growing city like Boise, we will have failed the mission that God has given to us. And so I'm here to fight that battle and to hang on to that, and to not just fight, but advocate for us to continue to find those who God calls to be here in that role.
Well, all joking aside, NNU is honored and blessed to have you as alumnus, and the work you've done in your career, and then to bless us by coming back to serve at College Church and NNU. So well-deserved honor, and we are deeply grateful for your ministry, both past, present, and future. So thanks for all you've done.
Yeah,
Thanks
for inviting me.
So what a blessing, isn't that right? That we get to come and get acquainted with people that we may or may not know well, And to know that that's kind of the DNA of the people that come to this place, that these people are representative of outstanding service and outstanding accomplishment. But that's where all of our hearts are, I think, is servant leadership, like you guys talked about, and so much more. So thank you so much for the interviews and for sharing your stories and for sharing yourselves with us. And thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate it so much. We're so glad you're on campus. And please, please, please join us for the other things that are happening this weekend. We're going to have fun together. We're going to share together. We're going to just reconnect with one another. And what a blessing that we have. We don't want to take it for granted because this does not happen in very many places, I don't believe. And so thank you so much. Have a great day.